What's up, sentient microbial sex? Today, I'm back. I got this really cool idea for a video from PhD Diaries on Twitter. I'll put her at right here where my face is probably. Um, but yeah, it's essentially this idea to do lab meeting bingo. I saw a lot of PhD students responding and kind of talking about their experiences, and I figured that I would provide an undergraduate experience. I've been in 5 labs in my undergraduate so far, ranging from like, fish toxicology to paleontology to ant ecology to soil microbiology. So I've done a lot of different stuff. Um, and I've had a lot of different PIs and been in different lab circumstances and environments. So I figured I would kind of just share some of my experiences with some of these issues and see which of these have happened to me. So I guess we'll start. The first one, insignificant data. I mean, this is basically every lab meeting. I think that's kind of the point of a lab meeting, though, is you're showing your results before you share it with a bigger audience, whether that be at a conference or uh, presenting the data or putting it in a paper. So essentially, I mean, that's kind of a common thing that happens. A lot of times I've had PIs that kind of like force schedules on having someone present every time we have a lab meeting. And that can get kind of weird because say something happens like there's a problem with the lab. I've had labs where we're doing cell culture. So there's like contamination. So then if there's contamination, no one's able to really work in the lab as we're trying to recover from it. But then when we get to the lab meeting, someone still has to present, but they have essentially no data. So I don't really understand why that's happened. But I mean, that's, I guess, kind of, it's all dependent on the PI. So moving on to the next thing, could have been an email. Yeah, this one's funny. I feel like this is especially some PI. It depends on who your PI is, but like some of them don't like lab meetings, or you can tell they would rather not be in a lab meeting. And then some of them really love to meet in labs, even though there's no real point to have a lab meeting. Like early on in the semester, we'll come and schedule a lab meeting. And I feel like a lot of times, at least from my perspective as an undergrad, like I also do sports in college. So I'm pretty busy, like time wise. And I know they're busy as well, but often they're busy in a different way. Like they have a lot of free time to do a lot of tasks, whereas I have like a lot of scheduled tasks in my day, and I'm like, okay, this is just one more thing I have to run from, say, a class or practice all the way back to get into the lab meeting, and there was no real point of it. Fell asleep. That's never happened to me until quarantine. So shout out to the coronavirus because I definitely fell asleep during my first lab meeting like last week. So that I mean, you just put your video off, and I was out for like a solid 15 minutes of that lab meeting. And I mean, I wasn't the one presenting. And again, going back to the could have been an email, a lot of it was just rehashing of stuff. So I don't know if I'm proud of it, but I've done that. So PowerPoint crashed. Yeah, that one PowerPoint crashed, and like whole computer failure happens. I swear it's like Murphy's Law. Like every single time someone gets up to present, the PowerPoint crashes or it doesn't work. And the like, say you're using a new building or a new meeting room, and you can't get the PowerPoint to move from the computer screen to the projector or something like that. It's always happening at every lab meeting. Um, Called on when you're not paying attention. Yeah. This happens, especially if maybe the PI and one of the grad students or a postdoc is talking, and they're like talking to each other, and like they're talking about something you don't really fully understand. Usually I mean, it's important to pay attention because if you're interested in the research, it's good obviously to be listening to what they're saying because they have more insight and experience than you, and that you can like learn a lot from them. So that's really good. But sometimes like they're in the middle of talking and you're kind of just zoned out, and they just say something to you, and you're like, "What? Oh, oops," and then you kind of just freeze for a second. So I feel like that happens to everyone, and it's not something to be that embarrassed about. So that's another thing. I feel like a lot of these things, and like the good part about this whole lab meeting bingo thing is that it kind of makes you feel like more like, oh, these I'm not the only one this is happening to, because in the moment a lot of these things feel really awkward whenever it feels like you've made a mistake or something, and that, like you're the worst in the world. But I feel like that happens to everyone. So that's I guess that's a good benefit of this. So shout out to PhD Diaries for that. Um, Way too much text on slides. I feel like this is the calling card of every undergraduate presentation. I've done it. You've done it if you were an undergrad. You're gonna do it if you haven't, and you're gonna be an undergrad. It's gonna happen because science is difficult, and that you have a lot to say, and you've done a lot of stuff, and you're trying to explain a lot in a really small amount. And so there's this tendency, you're always fighting this law, this like pull to like put more on this text on the slides. And obviously, that's PowerPoint 101. Text on the slides kind of looks awful, and there's just tons of it. And if they're reading the text, they're not listening to you. There's a lot of stuff. I'm sure everyone's heard it, and there are people who are more qualified to talk about that than I am. But it's a pretty typical thing for undergraduate presentations. Usually, having a grad student or the PI look over it helps. Although you're probably gonna get, like, depending on your PI, you could have a PI that gives you like 18 revisions, like email back and forth, the underscore 17. If so, anyone who's had that knows exactly what I'm talking about. Someone suggests learning R. Yeah, I think R is mainly used in biology labs. It's for statistical analysis if you don't know what R is, but basically it's a software in which you can code statistical analyses and you get nice plots. I've had a summer research experience where someone, while in the middle of the REU, I tried to learn R to do my statistical analysis. That was a bad idea because an REU is really short and not the time to also be trying to figure out how to learn a whole program and make plots in it when you're trying to get all the data done and presentable really quickly. But yeah, I don't know if that's I don't think it happens in geosciences particularly. Some of my research has been biology, some of it's been geosciences. I haven't had anyone talk about using R in geosciences. I could be wrong about that though. And so if you have, let me know in the comments. PI sits at the head of the table. Have I had this? Yes, I have. I have had some PIs. Some PIs like to sit at the head of the table. Some PIs just like to sit at the middle of the table. Some just sit wherever. I think it just depends on the just how formal the PI is. Obviously, that just depends on the person. Some people, you call them doctor. I mean, generally as an undergraduate, I always feel like I should call them doctor, and I always tend to. But with some PIs, the grad students will also call them doctor. With other PIs, they'll just call them by their first name. So it just depends on who it is and their level of formalness. Animations freeze. That kind of goes along with the PowerPoint crash. Yeah, I've had that one as well. Not personally, but I've seen it, where kind of just the animation freezes and PowerPoint crashes. Not really too much else. I mean, usually it's a quick reboot, and it's better in a lab meeting than in front of a large audience. So I guess it's not that bad. No one asked a question. Yeah, I mean, a lot of times no one has a question, but you feel like pressured to put a question, to say a question, because your PI is wanting input from everybody in the lab. Like, oh, this person's finished presenting, guys, what do you have to say? And I guess it's good to have feedback, but often, at least for me, it's like in an undergraduate position, even though like some of the labs I've been in the lab for over 2 years now, and still I don't really feel like I have that much knowledge in comparison to people who have their PhDs in the topic. So like I feel like I don't, a lot of times they answer my question, so I don't have anything to say. What's next? Someone tried looking smarter than the presenter. Yeah, I think that's just different people's personalities. I've had that. I feel like that's a really dumb idea, so don't do that if you're an undergrad. Don't try to like outsmart, and you don't. I feel like I've had people in labs who you can tell that they want to come across as smart, and it's really obvious and kind of really phony, and there's just really no need to do it. You don't need to try to outsmart the presenter. Or try to come up with questions that they can't answer. I mean, if you have a question, ask your question, but don't do the thing that this is typical. I mean, it's typical amongst guys where they like do the thing where they don't even ask a question. They just say stuff about themselves and how qualified they are, or just which is typical for like conferences. And then in the case of a lab meeting, it would be like just saying stuff that you think is right instead of asking a question and then saying, "What do you think about that?" It's like you've kind of asserted your own opinion, and I feel like it would be better to just ask the question, so phrase it better. Awkward silence. This definitely happens. I've had this happen a lot while we're waiting for the PI, or if the PI is frustrated about something, uh, like there's some sort of like lab it's not clean or something, and the PI is kind of angry, and everyone's just kind of sitting there awkwardly. Free space. Always love a good free space. Online lab meeting. Well, this is quarantine, so everyone's at an online lab meeting now. I've had some PIs that actually like we do online lab meetings not during quarantine, or I've had one PI that does that, and I kind of like that a lot of times because I get that PIs don't want to, like going back to the could have been an email. I feel like they want us to talk amongst each other because it's important for ideas. Um, and sometimes we don't need to meet, and understanding that that's a lot of work for other people to like get to a certain area because it's always generally lab meetings in the most uh, at the best time and at the perfect area for the PI, right? And everyone else has to like fly around to get there. And understanding that maybe we could just do it online works just as well. Although I guess Zoom interactions aren't equivalent to human interactions, but I feel like it's a good idea. PI emphasizes the importance of the lab meeting. Yeah, some PIs will literally mention how important the lab meeting is to be a part of at every lab meeting. Or like the first couple lab meetings will basically, when no one has anything to present, will just be talking about how important the lab meeting is. And I get that when there's new people in the lab and trying to explain the structure of the lab, but sometimes I've been in labs where nothing has changed. And I guess they just want to emphasize that. From my perspective, I don't really understand it all of the time, but that's definitely something that's happened to me. Lab meeting canceled. This is a strong one right here. Strong contender for most common occurrence, depending on the PI. Of just, it's like some PIs will cancel every lab meeting if they have a minor inconvenience, but want you to be at every lab meeting. And I mean, it's kind of hypocritical, and it's kind of frustrating. But they will cancel if they have anything going on. They'll cancel every lab meeting after lab meeting after lab meeting, and then of course it'll come to the lab meeting when it's before. Everyone goes to this big conference, and then they're like, "Oh, we've gotten nothing done, and we haven't gone over anyone's presentations or posters." And you're like, "Well, we canceled 4 lab meetings in a row. So did you think about that beforehand?" But I guess that's just coming from my perspective. Turned lights off. Yeah, I've turned the lights off. I've sat next to the lights, so I've turned the lights off. I guess could I put that on my CV? Like is that like a response, like a leadership position? I'm in charge of the electric current in the room. Asked a question. Yeah, I mean, I've done research now for 3 years, so I've asked a question at some point in different labs. Like I said, I don't always have a question. You don't always have to have a question, but when you do, it's good to ask it, especially when you don't know. Don't ever feel like you need to stay silent because you don't know something that might be obvious. You're learning. That's the whole point. Especially if you're an undergrad, the point is to learn. Also, being a scientist is all about learning. So just learn. Wrote notes. Yeah, I've written notes in lab meetings for sure. Sometimes it's hard to write notes, but I feel like that's a really good habit to be in, and I need to be better about it, and will try to be better about it. No, I will be better about it in grad school, about writing notes at lab meetings because you often forget something that someone tells you. Someone gives you good advice to do something, and then you forget about it, and then you're like, oh, what was that I wanted to do? Like a lot of times I'll be like, I'm having this problem, and a grad student will be like, oh, did you try doing this? And I'm like, oh no, I didn't. I'll try that. And then I'll just put it away in my brain. Never happens. Never put it away in my brain. Or like 1 out of 10 times do I remember the thing. Then I'm sitting there and I'm like, I don't want to ask them again. I don't know where they are. I could text them, but it would have just been smart if I had just written it down. So don't be like me. Write things down. Meeting lasted longer than 2 hours. Yeah, that is an unfortunate one right there. That's definitely happened to me, and I feel like they shouldn't last longer than 2 hours because that's a really long time, and like that goes against everything that goes along with the like human attention span because I zone out. Um, PI presented. This is funny. I have never actually had a PI present. The only person who you could say that I've had present as a PI, so I don't know if I should count this or not, was at like a government lab that I worked at one summer. And the head of the government lab, who's I guess like a quasi PI, she presented, but Like as far as in like academia at my university, I've never had a PI present at a lab meeting. So I'm gonna leave that blank. That's actually really interesting. I'm interested if anyone else has had their PI present. So let me know if you've had your PI present. Meeting lasted less than an hour. Yeah, I mean, sometimes there's not much to say, and I don't have much to say about that. Uh, Presented without PowerPoint. I have never done that, and that sounds horrifying. Unless, I mean, I presented with a poster, but that's like a equivalent to a PowerPoint in a lot of ways. So presented without anything? No, I've never done that. I don't think I want to do that. That's hard. Sounds kind of scary, to be completely honest. Uh, Attended another labs meeting. I haven't done that either. I feel like that's something that happens more for grad students because they're trying to get some insight for something for their project. But typically, undergraduate projects are within the scope of one lab. Like it's not that broad of a project that it's outside of your PI's expertise. So I've never attended another labs meeting. And then skipped a lab meeting. Yeah, we've all done it. I've skipped lab meetings. I just skipped a lab meeting this week on accident. So there's that. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this lab meeting bingo. Thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. Just remember, one like equals, I don't know, what should one like equal today? One like equals one sulfur dioxide particle leaving the atmosphere. So if you don't like global warming, then one like. So thank you for watching. Peace. I forgot what I said at the end of my videos. Thank you.
That's why I was sad. You didn't say keep it loopy.
Thank you for watching. Keep it loopy.